Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chatting with Asta. This is available on YouTube if you're watching us and seeing us right now. We're also available in podcast form on Apple Podcast and Spotify. And yeah, so basically, this has been my way of keeping social and spotlighting voices of all types of people, mostly artists, as you can tell so far. And today, my guest is Justin Andrew Davis. He is a actor, filmmaker, writer, really wonderful person that I've been lucky to meet. And you can check out some of his work in Myth, which is now on Amazon Prime. And soon, You Look Great is going to be out. And welcome to the show, Justin.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so it's wild because I previously had Brian DiLorenzo on the show, who is the director of Myth,
Hmm.
which is a feature you're in,
Yep. Yep.
and it's kind of been a whirlwind because one of the last two times that I was around more than like five people was the Winter Film Awards.
Oh yeah. That
Yeah,
was that February maybe or January?
pre-Corona. That's all I know. I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, I forget exactly. This year is a blur, so I don't even remember
Yeah,
what month that was. Maybe it was December even. Oh God.
I don't even know.
Um, yeah, but yeah, that was a really fun time.
Yeah, yeah, and it's
Um,
great to see that you are, like Myth has come out during quarantine, and soon you will also be releasing You Look Great. Right?
Somewhere, yeah. I haven't figured that out yet. Like, I'm done with the festival run for it, and now
Yeah,
I want to release it publicly.
yeah,
And ideally, I'd want it to land somewhere where it has, a decent reach and kind
yeah,
of connects with like the mental health and eating disorder community. Because I could just put it up on YouTube, but I feel like there's a better path. I just don't know it yet.
yeah, and then just figure out if anybody has suggestions. Feel free to comment, and I'm sure you'll take a look. But so those are two very interesting roles that I've seen you in, and they're both wonderful because they speak to something which I kind of gravitate towards you as an artist is that you are
Mm,
very open to being vulnerable and like
mm.
and I feel like you may have seen I said you were like a lovable doofus in Myth, but I meant that like in the nicest way. It's so rare, I think, that especially men when they play roles that allow themselves to just be overtaken in a story
Mhm.
like that character in Myth really lets the world wash over him and he allows himself to be influenced and manipulated, but like there's such a you have to as a performer you really have to not you have to just allow that to happen. And what was that
Mhm.
process for you? I mean, maybe I'm overreading into it, but I just thought it was so beautifully simple and like yeah.
Yeah. No, I connect with all of that. Um, I think I've always kind of grown up empathetic, maybe to a fault. It's like a superpower and a curse, in some way, if you can imagine.
Yeah.
And so I think it's I don't have a problem necessarily coming across as vulnerable or weak or showing pain on screen or anything like that. I've been in therapy for a while and stuff like that. So it's just like that is all just a process of, opening yourself up and examining yourself and, confronting your pain, your history, your experiences, all that kind of good stuff. But yeah, with Myth, I think I just surrendered to the process because it was just kind of like, I was granted this great, big, huge opportunity, and I took it very, very, very seriously. Came to set prepared, open to possibilities, everything, and I had to kind of just say, like, I am worthy. I deserve this shot. I deserve to lead this story, and just feel um, like I have a performance and perspective that matters.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just sort of, it is what it is. Just like, all right, that is what happened today, and we'll go on to the next day, and just kind of keep being open and vulnerable, and let the world in, and just just see what'll happen next.
Yeah, and I was reading a bit about you on your website. You said that you had a degree in creative writing, and so this kind of came a little bit later. And I found that fascinating, just because you said you had a focus in poetry, and I feel like that really makes sense because you have this kind of poetic soul where you um, sort of a sense of values that maybe almost feels like romantic Victorian or something. But I see
Boy
it,
Scoutish.
yeah, like there's this kind of like this I don't know, there must be a word that you probably know that's like the male version of like an ingenue, like someone who's just like completely
Oh,
willing to surrender to the
hmm.
moment. And because I feel like, and also saying the writing thing too, now you're pursuing acting, like I feel a lot of actors put on this muscle where they're trying to make everything sound and look interesting. And I think,
Oh no, you don't have to.
but you understand that, and I think maybe it's because you haven't been like doing this like in the same path as others. um,
Hmm.
Whereas like I feel like I kind of vibe with you on that, because when I was in school I did a BFA acting, but I also was in pre-med, and I was surrounded by
Oh,
really weird and interesting people. And whereas some of my actor friends, BA or BFA, were playing actors. Like they were looking at actors, they were being interesting like actors, and I was like, "But people can be so simple." Like
well,
maybe
right, but I mean, like, you shouldn't be like the archetype of actor. You should just be a human. You
yeah,
know what I mean? And it's just kind of like, I am sort of. It's kind of like, I've approached this as a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I'm like, oh man, think of all the time I lost when I could have been pursuing acting, because ultimately, I think I've been grinding at this thing,
yeah,
performing for like 5 to 6 years, somewhere between there. That's it. But I've done a lot of work in that time. So I do sort of mourn, like, oh, it took me so long to
yeah,
find it. But I think there are some beautiful benefits where I don't necessarily have, I guess, bad habits that people have. Um, I came to it as an adult, like knowing like I want it, I enjoy this, and I didn't have any preconceived notions because I wasn't studying it my whole life.
yeah,
And I fell in at the Barrow Group, which is a wonderful, wonderful theater community in the city, and I've only studied there, and they just sort of gave me the tools to, not just feel confident and worthy, but just that like you can be yourself,
yeah,
and that you are interesting in and of yourself, and that their sort of process, a lot of the things they do are super pragmatic, like actionable, not like what is my motivation, like charactery, kind of like heady, like every line is a verb kind of stuff. It's none of that. And
yeah,
so it's interesting that you said, like saying like you don't have to kind of adorn
mm,
things, like as one of the tools in their classes is called, avoid the conflict. And so basically, if there's a scene where it seems like two characters are arguing or fighting,
yeah,
do everything you can to not do that. And the thing that's interesting about that is, one, people tend to not want to fight, and two, the words are written as combative, so
yeah,
you don't need to put anything on them. You're going to fight because they are written to fight. You
yeah,
don't need to like make sure the audience knows we're fighting.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting that you put all that, you mentioned all that, because I have thought about all of that too.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I mean, I've definitely run into other performers who are like, I've been doing this since I was like 10, and all this stuff. And I almost want to be like, and there's obviously like validity in that and credibility in that.
100%.
But I know that from my perspective, I have always wrestled with the idea of being a performer, because I've tried to marry it with therapy and with my purpose. And
Okay.
now I'm at a point where I feel like I can honestly say I've been purposefully and actively pursuing a career in the performing arts for like 6, 7 years. But
Yeah.
before that,
Mhm.
I was just like, I was in the career, but also studying other things, living life, having experiences. But now I'm
Mhm.
more purposeful about why, what the stake is in it for me. And I feel like with your piece, You Look Great, I feel like it speaks to that kind of gathering of ideas, which is what I need to work on as a person to heal my art, and what do I need to do as an actor to give myself a showcase, and what can I do to like push those together to help others, and it's a beautifully
Mhm.
beautifully candid piece. So for those of you who don't know, You Look Great is a short film that Justin wrote and starred in, and it focuses on a male going through an eating disorder, but you actually like personify the eating disorder. So you want to talk about that project and I mean, kind of where it came from and came to?
Sure, sure. So, I had been dealing with eating disorders in a significant way, probably for about 10 years by the time I started writing You Look Great, maybe a little bit less. It started it started kind of in college when I first started really exercising and losing weight and eating better and having people sort of notice and compliment me. And that's sort of a thing that gets explored in the film.
Yeah.
Um, so people who were close with me, it was like no secret, like close friends, close family, knew that I had issues with food, with exercise. I grew up heavier,
Mhm.
got made fun of. I was bullied when I was younger, and I had, all of these experiences and all of these insights, and I would talk about it a little bit with people, and the more I sort of opened up and talked about it, I realized how universal these insecurities and what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, yeah, I mean, just insecurities and problems and like secrets and stuff like that, mental health issues. Like it's these are all things we all go through. And when I started to kind of get that insight a little bit more, I was just like, you know what? I don't think I've seen this story anywhere
Yeah.
from a man's perspective. Like, I am living through this. I'm not just like researching it. So I can bring truth to it. And so I just started writing it and, kind of went through a year of drafting it on and off because I was pursuing things. I might have started it around the time when Myth was in principal photography, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, and it's everything that you see in the film comes from real experience. I tried to be as authentic as humanly possible. Just to sort of in the behaviors that I explore. Like the body checking, pinching at myself, avoiding food, drinking coffee to supplement, over exercising, binging, purging, all of that. It was very, very, very important to me to show exactly as I have lived.
Yeah.
And so yeah, the climactic scene, which I don't want to ruin, is actually the first scene that came to me. I was just like, oh, am I allowed to curse on this?
Oh, I mean, you can. I don't.
Okay, okay, right. I'm not gonna well, I was just like, oh, that's so fucked up. I was like, all right, how do I write to that scene? And so I kind of reverse engineered the story.
Yeah.
But it was important to me. Um, so, like you had said, the eating disorder is personified. Like
Yeah.
that's not like a big reveal or anything. And so when my tasks was like, how do I make this story interesting, where we know from the beginning his eating disorder is personified.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I did the same or similar thing with a short that I did about PTSD. Like I
Mhm.
wanted to try and like make without going too genre-y or anything. I want it to be like it literally feels like your rapist is following you all the time. Like
Okay.
it
Oh,
literally
I see.
like the moment that anybody like touches you or a sound triggers you, you feel like it's with you. It's like you're carrying it. And until you like recognize that's what it is and like confront it, like it's just going to keep hounding you. And so I feel like that's something that I was touched, and I also, I don't talk about it much, but I dealt with eating disorder, and was kind of forced into therapy for it, and had, I was reading briefly your piece that you wrote about how getting into therapy and how one of the things you said was it's important to have the right match, and
Yes.
eating disorders are really hard to treat because, and maybe you agree with me on this, maybe you don't, but in some ways it's kind of the wart that never goes away. Like it's something that you always have to actively fight and work on, because it can sneak up on you. You know, it can like, you can say, oh, I got treated for it and I'm fine now, and then like, you know, suddenly
Hmm.
you're, you know, dealing with it. And I had a therapist who, my first session with her, she grabbed my arm and she was like, look how tiny and fragile you are. That's disgusting.
Oh,
No man would
really?
ever, no man would ever want you. And I was like,
This is verbatim?
yes. And
That's
she,
horrifying.
yeah, and her like report to my parents was to tell me to drink Ensure with every meal and all this stuff. And it took me a week before I stood up for myself and I was like, this isn't working for me. Like I can't, this
I'm
isn't.
so sorry. That's terrible.
But I mean, there it's a complicated disorder because depending, there's so many different categorizations. You know, there's bulimia, there's anorexia. I believe the term is orthorexia, where you're like obsessed with exercise and healthy eating.
I think that's correct, yes.
Yeah, and
And they all blur a little bit too.
yeah, they blur. And like in my case, I was specifically anorexic, which feels different than bulimic because you're not necessarily in the binging and purge. You're more like diminishing
Right.
yourself and punishing yourself. Like
Right.
nuns do this stuff. Like it's like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, but when I wasn't allowed to prevent myself from eating, I would turn to bulimia, like bulimic tendencies, you know. So
Right.
it's interesting because you really do need to find what is the core of reason that's making you behave this way, you know. And
Hmm.
I thought with your, without giving it away the ending, but I thought you explored like how
Oh, yeah.
how horrible it is when people say hey, you look great when they don't know the sources of why you are what you are. Like in
Yeah.
general, I like to try and not say like, oh my gosh, have you lost weight? Or look, I
Yeah.
try to say like, how are you doing? Or your energy is
You
glowing.
look well, you look healthy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, because there is a pressure, especially in this industry, right? Like when people
Oh,
they,
yeah.
they want to tell you exactly how you look, but is it a compliment? Is it problematic? You know?
It's yeah, well, I mean, like, that's yeah, I mean, that's a big thing. Like I said, when I first started, um, losing weight and stuff in college and thereafter through exercise and diet, there were compliments. People did observe, and that became a drug. That became heroin. It's just like I was chasing, more and more compliments, and if they stopped, they felt like I was falling behind or I had gained weight or messed something up. And I don't want to put. I'm not going to put all stock in that. Like that is not the primary motivating factor. I'm just saying it is something. It is a contributing factor it'll keep you there. It'll keep you there. And people aren't doing this intentionally. At least I hope.
Yeah,
But it's just interesting, like having called my film "You Look Great." I mean, I knew like it's just a very common thing that people say, and it's like even more so now. I'm just like, it
yeah,
is so fucking common. It's just like this is just a thing people do, and they mean well.
yeah,
Um, but you just never know the reasoning behind the way somebody looks.
yeah. Or like what that kind of comment on someone's look like can do to them. Because you know, like one of the things that I joke about, especially with my husband, is this idea of like you never tell a woman she looks tired. Like it's like there's certain things that you just don't do, and I feel like
Or ask her age.
yeah, or ask her age, or or like qualify like, oh, you look really good today. Like, what did I look like shit yesterday? You know, it's like there's and it's what after watching your short, I like it took I honestly it took me a week because it felt like whiplash. Like I was like I understood it from being someone having gone through eating disorder. Like
Mhm.
I definitely had a 24-hour gym in my apartment in college.
Yeah.
You know, like I was the only one there. I'll put it that way.
Oh, I've definitely been at the gym. I had a 24-hour gym near here at like, I don't know, 11, 12, 1 at night before. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. And so I those kinds of things I completely got. I've also like eaten Pop Tarts, like because I'm like, oh, you never allow yourself to eat Pop Tarts, and I eat it, and then I feel guilty. You know, like I've definitely there were things
Yeah.
that I totally like I got, but
Yeah.
then like the overall message of your film, I realized like even I'm complicit. If I like say something to someone about like, what have you been doing? Like, or
Uh,
I'm part of like that thing, and I think we all need to. And that's especially hard right now because we're in quarantine and people are already joking about like the quarantine 15 and like things like
yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, quarantine has been difficult in that sense because, um, I had that outlet of the gym, which, I have a much healthier relationship with exercise. I'm exercising more so because I guess I love my body rather than punishing it.
Yeah,
Um, you know, um, and yeah, it's hard because it's just kind of like, you're at home a lot of the day, and food, can be like a tempting thing, and especially with boredom and,
yeah,
ennui and depression and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, it has made the struggles worse in some way, which, going back to what you were saying, I think it is something that never completely goes away. It's something that I face on a day-to-day basis, in to varying severities.
yeah,
It's not as shameful or um, intense as it was, for sure. But
yeah,
it's I still, I'm battling the inner critic who has things to say about the food I'm eating, or being like, you didn't get to exercise today, so then you don't feel like your best self, or you don't feel like your most attractive self, and so I have to negotiate still.
yeah,
I don't know if I believe in complete recovery. I don't think that's like a thing. I don't think it's possible. Like, I think, like, aren't like an alcoholic is like, they consider themselves an alcoholic their whole life, right? And so even if they don't drink, it's like they're still like, this is a thing I have to deal with. It's still a
yeah,
thing I have to manage. And so I not to be like, it's never going to get better. Like, it's much much better, but I think it's sort of naive to think like, oh, now I have no problems with food or exercise or my body. It's just like, it's just not. I don't. It's not how it works.
yeah. I've gone like up and down like in my weight over the years, mainly like due to the core thing. I had this therapist when I was put in therapy like right after my senior year of high school, and
Hmm.
um, I had this therapist who looked like Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting, and
Nice.
he was very like he had like the beard and a little,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he
Very
said,
fatherly.
yeah, and he always used to drop these like sage wisdom like Confucius says kind of stuff, and one of the things that whenever I feel like my ED is catching up with me is he said to me like, do you ever feel that you're trying to make the outside look like how you feel on the inside? And that's like, for me specifically, that's kind of been at my core where I'm like, am I trying to diminish myself because I feel small right now?
Oh.
Or I feel
Mhm.
like this is something I can control. So I'm trying to like whittle myself down. And,
Yeah.
like if I go and I look at pictures from throughout my life, like whenever I've had interventions, because they happen every few years, like suddenly you'll see you gain weight for like a few months and then something stressful happens. And then suddenly I'm like, like right the day of my wedding, um, I had a panic because um nothing fit because I lost like 10 pounds in like a week
Oh, wow.
because I was so stressed about controlling all the different aspects of
Right.
wedding, which is weddings are the stressful thing. The marriage part has been phenomenal. The wedding
Yeah,
was stressful.
I can only imagine.
But you so I've just come to realize like I need to acknowledge the issue
Yes.
and then
Mhm.
acknowledge my trigger and then that but yeah, like you said, alcoholics they have that too. Like I've I've dealt with alcoholism as well. So it's like you have
Okay.
to kind of decide what your path is, and none of us are perfect. And
Right, right. I mean, acceptance is a big, big part of it, and
yeah,
like you said, like just being like, okay, I have the self awareness that um, these behaviors can come up, and so it's just sort of my job to be like, just kind of cut them off as best as I can, and to not beat myself up if I, you know, fall off the wagon in some respect. I mean, more often than not, I'm not engaging in any of like this destructive kind of behaviors.
yeah,
But I think if you sort of, or if you're expecting perfection and like complete recovery, I think that becomes an impossible standard to uphold. you
yeah,
know and so I mean, like, I even think about that a little bit in like my creative work, and like with working out, like there'll be a lot of times like, well, if I can't work out for an hour, why fucking bother? And
yeah,
it's just like, no, it's just like, no, that's like, no, it's like small steps make big changes. And so
yeah,
it's just kind of like, it's better to be like, okay, I walked for 15-20 minutes around the block. I
yeah,
could do that. And so, I forget exactly where I was going with this, but it's just like with like complete recovery. So if you just realize that like some days are going to be better than others, sometimes you'll be good at taming the voices, sometimes you won't. Like, just like acceptance is very, very important, and just being like recognizing your accomplishments. Because, like I said, 15 to 20 minutes is still 15 or 20 minutes. A page is still a page of writing,
yeah,
because you very easily could have, watched TV, not gone out and written, not gone out and walked,
yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's I think something really beautiful about the poetic nature of who you are. Like you you are tapped in, and when you're tapped into how you're feeling, you're not going to engage in behaviors or lose track of good habits that you've been building on. And
hmm
it's just it's beautiful to see because I feel like especially with men that's such a hard hurdle to jump is acknowledgement
sure,
because you want to seem like you have your shit together, that you're the strong person, and that
sure.
all of that. And I think that that's something. So keep doing that. Whatever.
Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting because at every film festival that I've gone to, like there has been like I'm pretty sure I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's every film festival. There has been a man or men who have been like, I totally understand what you're presenting here. Like I've had similar experiences, or a little bit, or or exactly the same. And it's just been it's been eye opening.
Yeah.
Like I said, like everybody goes through this, and I remember when I was first talking about that, it's just like people are like, oh wow, you never hear about this. And it's just like, yeah, I mean, it can happen. It can literally have mental health doesn't discriminate against anything.
No.
Your age, your gender, your ethnicity, your sexuality, none of it. It's just we're all susceptible to these things. And yeah, I think there is historically this precedent that men can't talk about mental health because it just kind of like comes across as weak. I think there's definitely been instances where I'm like, I should be bucking up. This should not be a problem, and
Yeah.
that delayed treatment, and that made my conditions worse. Like I did not go into therapy when I needed to. When I should like I went to therapy because I hit rock bottom with
Yeah.
a bunch of things, not just this.
Yeah.
And so, and I think part of that is because I felt like I should be able to do this on my own, which I do think is sort of like a masculine ideology that needs like addressing.
Exactly. I mean, and that bleeds into all of society because if we perceive like emotionality, vulnerability as weaknesses, then we don't see the fact that, having emotionality, vulnerability, and humility at that point, like they are things
Hmm.
that show adaptability, that they show a willingness to learn and to create better each and every time. But if you already think you know it all, then
Hmm.
you're immovable. And on that note, I wanted to ask you the question I ask all my guests, which is given this conversation, given this week, given this year, which feels like 6 years, what
Yeah.
is your message to the universe, or what pops into your head that you'd like to send out today?
I think it's one you hear it a lot, but I think it's just because it's true and it needs saying, which is you are enough and you are doing enough. It's just you are worthy in and of yourself, and it's just kind of like I mean, it's all well and good that I'm an actor and a writer and I do these things, but it's like I have worth outside of my accomplishments or goals.
Yeah.
And in the same breath, um, exactly what I was just saying is just kind of like give yourself credit for the small steps, because the small steps really, really honestly add up over time.
Yeah.
So I said, like, even if it's page a day, after 3 months, 90 days, you got a feature film script,
Yeah.
and so don't like say like I need to write 10 pages a day or I'm not a writer. No, write that page, you're a writer.
Yeah.
Go for that half a mile jog, you're a runner.
Yeah.
And just sort of, yeah, knowing that you have the power inside of you, and that you don't need to aspire to unrealistic goals or expectations, and just consistently do and find contentment in the doing.
That's perfect, and it's definitely in par with the idea of just meeting the moment and allowing things to just be ever present. I think because we live in an age of technology and hyper productivity, we put such pressures on ourselves when really we're looking at highlight reels. We're having being met with unrealistic expectations, and it is amazing what can be done when you just pretend that technology doesn't exist. You're like, oh,
Oh, yeah, just sort of really, really quickly, like the one thing that I've come to realize more and more, and maybe it's through quarantine, is like one of our superpowers is really just our focus and attention and commitment. And so if you are able to like really just do something, even if it's just an hour, right? Like if you really write for an hour, or if you really work out for an hour, or if you really study something for an hour, like it is crazy how much your brain and your life will change. Like if you're just like not even taking a break to like check your email, check social media, like literally, if you're in, like I said, it's really like a superpower.
exactly. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me and joining me on the show today, Justin.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Of course. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Chatting with Asta. I also want to give a big thanks to my guest this week, Justin Andrew Davis. It was lovely talking to you, and your message is really relevant right now, which is you are enough, and know your worth deep down. And if you're enjoying this episode, especially, don't forget to interact with us. We have an Instagram page, we have the YouTube page, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now also iHeartRadio. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, and share. Sharing is caring after all. And yeah, see you guys next week.